Well, and I really like that we're talking about this tonight and just showing those upfront costs of getting started and all of that because childcare is incredibly expensive. And I think that people are like, well, I just don't know why more people don't start in-home daycares or why we don't have more. And then you see how much it costs to get going and to follow all the rules. And I just heard a story on my way home tonight about that, most of us, when we were paying childcare, it was more than in-state tuition for college in a year. It was 10% of a family's income and third of a single parent family's income, which is just staggering. So I think it's really great that we're doing this and that we're talking about these costs because it is really expensive, but I really think it's going to be worth it.
Well, and one of the things to remember too, in at-home daycare, they only have typically one person there, and it really limits the number of students that they can have. And one thing we wanted to, how can we maximize the number of kids? And just because there's 2 providers, you don't get to double. But it did allow us to go to 9 versus 6. If we only have one provider in the classroom, it's 6, and then we wouldn't be able to honor everybody who needs it right now.
Well, if no one has any more questions for Judy, this is a action item tonight.
I would motion to approve utilizing ESSER 3 funds to cover cost of 4 child care classrooms for the 2023-2024 school year as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Good discussion. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item 7A, additional changes, additions to healthcare sections of student handbooks.
Mr. Jared Giffen, Director of Human Resources, will provide an update summary.
I'll try to make this fairly quick, and I apologize that this wasn't included in the original student handbooks. So I do apologize for that. These changes have really come about. I was talking to Jen Arndt, our nurse for the district, and she was asking about some changes to make these each of these sections have a little bit more continuity between the elementary, middle, and high school books. So there are some sections that were in some of the books, but not the others. So we're just asking for those to be similar. For example, on the first page of this, the elementary one did not have anything about accommodating students with diabetes. So we were asking to include that. The next one is authorization required. She just really defined more what anaphylaxis episodes were to include more of the specifics for those that were reading this particular item. The other health considerations, we always get questions about what constitutes a fever for our students. A lot of people, think the standard, but the employee nurses really use that 100 degree. So if a student's temperature is increasing over the day and they're approaching that, we're probably going to call a parent. But 100 degrees is typically what our nurses use and our health offices use for that standard. They also went to clarify some other things that would require a student to need to stay home, diarrhea, vomiting. There are some exceptions to that the nurse's office are glad to explain and talk to, and that's really on a case-by-case basis and based upon the illness that student may have. The next one is just student health screenings, just really including that in all 3 handbooks as it's listed there. The middle school one, the only other change other than that was on the physical examinations piece, and it really just clarified that absences due to not having a physical would be considered unexcused until and play into those truancy laws. So other than that, everything else is standard. The rest of that middle school and the high school, again, just trying to align those handbooks and include these health considerations so that we can try to eliminate more questions that come to our nurses' offices. So what questions might you have about those?
I think my only question was on the middle school one. It says grades 9 through 12. Should it say 8 or 6 through 8 instead on the physical? Or is that just the standard language?
It's just the similar language. That's what's covered in policy.
Just wanted to make sure.
Good catch.
Thank you.
One more question. So, does this change reflect the current practice, or will our practice change because of this change?
This is pretty much current practice.
Any other questions? Okay, this is an action item. What are the wishes of the board?
I move to approve the healthcare changes for the respective student handbooks as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Item 7B, fee schedule for 2023-2024.
Dr. David McGehee, Interim Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, has the next 3 items.
Along with sharing one with Jared. Yeah, this is just your fee schedule that you approve on an annual basis. I believe that the technology fees have not been actually on this schedule in the past. That can create some inconsistencies across the district, depending upon, in talking to Paul, there are times when maybe you get a better deal at one time of the year on a particular piece of technology that needs to be replaced. And so there were some instances where one school might be charging one fee for something to be repaired or replaced, and another school might be charging a different fee. So my opinion was, let's get it in front of the board, get it approved so that it's consistent across the district. And then also you'll see a pretty significant increase in driver rates for the school function and the non-school function, trying to catch those up to the salary schedules.
I meant to ask this earlier. What is a non-school function?
A function that is not sponsored by any sort of school organization.
Okay. I just didn't know our buses did that, or
I
our
didn't-
Suburbans, but
You know, actually, I remember when I was at United Way and we took some ESU students to do some service, and we were able to rent a school
okay,
bus
cool.
from the district. So
It was
Good
new
to
to
know.
me. It was new to me coming from Missouri. We weren't
Mhm.
allowed to utilize our buses that way. But so I asked about the actual didn't really get a clear answer to what is a non-school function. Just that yes, we do
Okay.
use them for non-school.
Okay.
function.
I
And the
think
rate's
I'm-
higher on the
yeah, I
non-school
think I
function
remember now.
because typically that's an overtime rate.
I think I actually now remember writing one when I did Leadership Emporia, like in 2005. That was non-school, obviously.
And we did not base these rates on average salary for the drivers because it's quite a jump. We just went to the base rate and based these fees on that rate.
Okay.
And we just did this for the National Teachers Hall of Fame inductees for their tour.
Thank you for the examples.
And I'm really happy to see those rates increase for drivers. I know that we had such a shortage last school year, and so hopefully that will be an added incentive to, to get more bus drivers to drive those extra routes for us. I do have a question, and I think, I'm not sure if I'm reading this wrong. So it is my understanding, just based on the supporting information under the public content, that if I pay my $10 technology fee and my child damages his Chromebook, I don't have to pay any of the repair costs because it's covered by the $10? Am I reading that right?
I believe the $10, and Paul can back me up on this, is to cover accidental damage. But if there's, someone has gotten angry and destructive, then there would be a fee.
So I'm reading and it says when Chromebooks are damaged intentionally or the damage is accidental, but the student has not paid their technology fee, there are charges associated with the repair. So is it like the $10 is insurance that I'm paying for the Chromebook?
It's basically your insurance policy that if some accident occurs, that's going to cover it. If everyone were to pay their $10, sometimes we have a difficulty getting everyone to pay their $10. We'd probably come closer to covering the cost of those accidents, but I think we come a little short because we don't necessarily collect from everyone every year.
Mhm. And I wonder, and you weren't here, so you weren't here at the beginning of the school year, so maybe it's a question for Paul or Dr. Harder. But are families aware of, what the cost might be if they don't pay that $10? Like, if you don't pay the $10, you actually may have to pay a lot more down the road if your Chromebook gets damaged. Just so they have a better understanding that if they don't pay the $10, it could cost a lot more later on.
I don't know that we have those specific conversations with them. I mean, that may be more of a conversation with the principal, with the parents, rather than technology. So if they see like, the Chromebooks aren't being used appropriately, then they're going to talk to the parents and they're going to explain that to them. The other thing is that there is intentional damage at times, and the other part is that when we've been looking at the Chromebooks and the high school students being able to keep them when they're seniors, there has been an improvement on how well they're taking care of them. So that's an incentive. So there's some good, and then just the other areas we need to address.
I like your act, Jamie, because we could probably put something on the Power School enrollment, like right under the technology fee, that keep in mind that if you do not pay this fee at this time, your cost for a damaged Chromebook could be considerably higher or something like that.
Absolutely.
I think that would be really great.
Just that upfront
Yeah.
information.
It might be a good item to consider for handbooks in the future.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you for taking my questions.
Does anyone else have questions this evening? Okay. This is also an action item.
I would move to approve the district fees for the 2023-2024 school year as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. I will call this item 7C with an asterisk to include the child nutrition food service management item from consent agenda.
Right. This is a fairly regular action item that comes to you on an annual basis as well. We have received a request from our food service director for the board to approve a 5-cent increase in cost for breakfast and a 10-cent increase in the price of a lunch. And that's the gist of the item that I have. Again, rising costs. I mean, we've done a lot with just labor costs has a lot to do with it.
And thank you for indulging me as I created precedent this evening by removing an item from the consent agenda. And Jared, I feel really bad because why, Jared? I feel like every time I have policy questions, you're at the mic. So really sorry about that. So I have no problem with the policy, but I actually had some questions and some clarifications around it. And I had actually emailed David earlier this week because I was really curious about our district's lunch and school meal debt. And he shared with me that right now we have a current student debt balance of $13,943. So I'm wondering if you could maybe walk us through what some of that collection process looks like. What do alternative meals look like? And also, I was really curious about something in the policy that said, it's the bottom of the first page, that if the debt is not paid within 10 days of mailing the final notice of the negative account balance under policy DP, it shall be considered bad debt for the purposes of federal law concerning unpaid meal charges. And so I was really curious what that line meant. So hi, Jared.
Thanks. He says, good luck with that. So I couldn't begin to quote policy DP and the reasons behind all of that. All I know is I was asked to put this on. This was approved actually last year in September and the previous year in November. We were just trying to get it on for approval. And it is one of our board policies, EE, that just addresses those unpaid meal charges. So to address further the question about what those alternate meals look like, I can speak at the elementary level. I know we will never let a kid go hungry. If they come in late and breakfast is shut down, they're always going to get something. The same is true at lunch if they have an unpaid meal balance. And I can tell you at the elementary level, they're very lenient about this particular policy, and it will take more than 5 days or 10 days to get to a point where we're really starting to hound the family. I mean, we're going to send notices, and those come out all of the time from our food service folks in our office or in the offices. But they're going to get cheese sticks, a yogurt, a juice, something that's fairly healthy for them to get them through the remainder of the day. Teachers always have nice little snacks in their classrooms too if a student is just that hungry. So those are some of the alternates I know at the elementary level that they have, and I'm assuming it's something similar at the high school to get kids through the day. I know they've got their Spartan closet out there that may have some things too that could get kids through the day. So that's a little bit about the other meal charges. Jumping down to the federal laws, again, I would definitely have to look into that to see why that's a piece of this. It's just an annual approval that we were asked to put on here. I'm sorry, I can't answer those specific questions.
I
here
have a question
on
that
the
might help
spot.
us get to the answer for that. It sounds like it's some sort of federal law that allows the debt to be somehow discharged or written off in a way. So let's just ask this question. Do we ever send the lunch debt to collections? Okay, so
I-
presumably the
No.
debt's
I
just,
think that's
Can
why
I-
we've got the
Yeah.
$13,000.
So about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we talked about a collection agency, but the board was not in support of that.
Right.
So usually the secretaries are often the ones who are calling.
Secretaries are food service folks. So there's one designated in each building. They're calling, sending notes. I remember going to homes a couple of times to ask if everything was okay, if there was something we could do to support them further beyond just what school lunches and breakfast had.
That balance of just under $14,000 doesn't represent a single year. That's a live debt account. So there could be multiple year debts in there. It's not that's what it was this year and here's what it was last year. That's a live number.
And thank you for clarifying that, because I think part of me was worried when I read that line that we are sending families to collections or something. So that's really good information.
Another benefit that's come from our community, I know from time to time, we'll have people step up anonymously and pay for some student food balances. I know my last year at Riverside, we had an anonymous donor wanting to pay off or give a certain amount. So we just applied it to, a percentage wise across all of those who had a negative balance. I know that happens all of the time. One year, I think we had somebody that picked up almost the entire meal balance that was due to the district. So we're fortunate to have a community like that.
Another thing to consider is, or just another piece of information, is that our food service staff are really good. That if we have full pay, students that are not paying, they'll reach out and ask them if they would like to fill out a free and reduced
I
form.
was just going to ask that.
Mhm.
Now, if a family, so as a follow-up to that, if a family applies at that time and they do qualify, do we retroactively forgive the meals they couldn't afford?
They would
Or-
would
okay.
look at all of that. They would
Okay.
look at their financial information.
Good to know.
Yeah, we have a great food service staff, and they're
Very
very
caring,
proactive.
yeah,
and they
yeah.
can be.
There was one more component of the original question about how do we go about trying to collect? And Denise had shared several things that they do. They utilize School Messenger. They do direct phone calls. They do some mailed statements. And then if it's a staff debt, they might do an email. And then also if they've done some mailed statements and not getting any activity, they might send a payment reminder home with the student.
when we refer to reduced price lunches, what does that look like for lunch and breakfast?
Yeah.
Or what's that figure and will it change? Will that figure be going up too because of this?
I believe I believe that lunch price is determined by the federal government. So we don't determine the price. It currently is 30 cents per breakfast and 40 cents per lunch for the reduced.
And I also just wanted to echo how much I value our school nutrition department. Denise Kidder's retiring, I think, in a couple of weeks. And Man, I just think the world of her. I've worked with her for so long, and she and the team that she leads have led us through some really hard times too these past couple of years. So they just have my deep, deep appreciation.
I had a question on the actual prices, and I know we approve them on a local level. Does the government suggest a certain price
You're
or?
supposed to calculate your labor and your costs and at minimum cover your costs for your.
So there are some guidelines,
Yes.
formulas to get to
There's a
this
formula.
point.
There's a formula to get to.
Okay.
It's not exact science. You can fluctuate from that, but you need that formula. You're supposed to charge a price that's going to cover your costs.
Okay.
I had another question. For the rates of reduced lunches, I think you said 20 and 30 cents or 30 and 40 cents. How much does that cost on average each year? Like how much are those students paying each year for those reduced fee lunches?
Just under $30,000
Under 30?
for all students all year. $28,850 for lunch and breakfast.
Now, some school districts, I think, cover that entirely. Is that something that we've ever looked into as a school district? Because I don't want to say $30,000 is chump change, but it's not the biggest fee we've seen pass through the school board before.
No, I've been up here asking you to spend a lot more money than $30,000. I can't speak for history. It wasn't on our radar to put that before the board, but obviously if the board asks us to do some research and consideration and bring something back to you, we can do that.
Allison, to the best of your recollection, have we ever looked at covering the cost entirely for the reduced lunches?
Well, our district is very generous, and so we don't have fees, and there's lots of districts that charge fees for textbooks. I mean, that's been waived a long time ago. So we have wanted families to contribute to their child's education, and that's, and we know, and we're very generous also behind the scenes that if we need to waive something, if we need to accommodate, we definitely are doing that. But I haven't heard of any districts, but that doesn't mean that they're not out there. So we can look into that.
I'd like to explore it a little bit. I mean, when we look at the general budget and the fund and we see what's in there, that's something that I think if the district pulled the trigger on, which I'm not going to spring that on anyone tonight and make that motion because it might give Allison a heart attack. But I think that's something that we could look at possibly exploring because that is, I think, an affordable cost. And there are families that even that 30, 40 cents regularly is going to be a struggle. I mean, there's kids 100%. I remember from my legal aid days, they're counting change when they leave the house to make the ends meet. So I just kind of want to put that out there. I think that's something that we should explore as a board to see if that's financially feasible. From sitting here, it would be hard to imagine that a $30,000 a year cost would kill the general fund. But I want to be conservative with our money, but I think it's something we should explore. I think we could do a lot of good.
I think that's a great suggestion. I can tell you from my work in my day job, and I've met with KSDE on school nutrition issues, and they have said that there are districts that do subsidize the reduced price meals. There are also districts that give all of their students universal free breakfast that the district just pays for themselves. So there's a lot of different options that I think we could explore because, I know we feed every kid who comes in the doors but if we could just ease the burden for some families too, I think it's something worth exploring.
It might also, I wonder sometimes what the shame factor is in families that don't pursue reduced lunches or subsidized lunches, who don't fill out that form and apply for it because it's just something that people don't sometimes want to do. And maybe just taking that element out entirely and you have universal breakfast, you cover the fees for those reduced lunches, and you're not going to have to worry about those families not putting their hand out to ask for help that they deserve because they have some sort of shame about it. So I feel like maybe that would actually, I don't know, probably feed more kids than might otherwise do.
And I love that. But keep in mind, they would still have to apply to get the reduced for us to cover the reduced.
Of course.
Yes. So they would still have to ask for help.
Right.
There
But
are some funding considerations to consider in your state aid as well, because you are, the at-risk factor is a weighted factor on your FTE. And so I think that if you didn't have them filling out and, qualifying, then that's going to affect your finances much more than 30,000.
I was going to add that it is very confidential. So I hear what you're saying on the shame of just any parent wanting anyone to know their name or what their financial situation is. But that is very confidential. Principals don't have access to that. There, it is a very small number of people, and that's at the food service level. And they have number of safeguards that ensure that confidentiality, but that is protected very carefully.
Yes, and I remember you mentioning that a couple meetings when this topic has come up before too, that is kept very much close to the chest. Dave, you may not know the answer to this question, but I get what you're saying, that, you know, the federal government uses the number of students that qualify for that
Well,
to
even state aid.
even state aid. Do you think that might still be a barrier if it was just universal breakfast as opposed to just both? Or I guess would that still count for the purposes of calculating
I
that?
don't know for sure. Like through COVID, when Universal was set, I was kind of out of the business during that time period, so I'm not exactly sure how that all interplayed and interconnected.
I can answer that
Okay,
because
thank
we
you.
worked very hard on that. And actually, Leslie's idea, I think, if I remember, we were giving that drawing for the devices to fill out. So anybody who filled out the form, because that was not required at the time, and we were very thankful because other districts were losing at-risk funding because they couldn't show how many families truly were at risk in any of those. So that funding is really important.
I also was thinking that, I know that we still don't have 100% participation rate on filling out our free and reduced rate applications. So if we were to subsidize, that could actually serve as an incentive as well to some families who might not know what the price is of reduced meals, and to realize that if they qualified for reduced, then they could actually get free, and we could see an increase in our at-risk numbers.
And I think it's a good idea for you to do anything that you can to incentivize people to fill out the form, even if they think they may qualify. And, you communicate it in a way and publicize it in such a way that there is no shame to it. It's something that you may or may not qualify for. We encourage you to, we recruited all the time in my former district and put messages out at various times of the year, because it's not just at the beginning of the year when you can pull those people into the roles and start helping them by subsidizing their meals.
I was just wondering how the application is given, the form for families. Is it like on paper or online? How do they access filling that out? And are we making it available to them readily all year long?
Right. Yes, they're accessible, and so it really is what the family needs. So, and Lindell may be able to answer this as far as, because that's an enrollment. So, Lindell, Mike, please.
Yes, it is an option for them to fill that out through the enrollment process. So that is one of the questions that they're asked, and then they can go right to that form and fill that out. It's also on the website 24/7, so they can fill it out then anytime too. And also our food service department, as we've mentioned, is great about working with them. So if they don't have technology or they need to do it, they can walk them through that, or they can actually work with them to fill that out over the phone or in person. Several different options for them to do that.
Okay, so what next? Are we going to go ahead and approve the policy, the child nutrition food service management, and the meal prices? Would you like those to be separate items? What's whatever everybody would like to do? Yes, Casey, separate. Okay.
I do want to just have a clarifying question. So I really liked, some of the questions you're asking, and also like what is feasible if we were to spend that extra 30,000. So could we have that brought back to the board, maybe the next meeting, perhaps?
I think it'd be good to maybe do even a little bit broader research than just that, because I do want to remind you that while our goal is for the food service operation to kind of be self-supporting, that the district and you through the board have already been generous enough to subsidize that program to cover excess costs. So I would want to kind of wrap it into where are we on excess costs history, and then you can kind of see what this might do to impact.
Perfect. Thank you. I will make a motion to approve the child nutrition food service management policy as submitted. EE.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes. Oh, sorry, Casey.
You're on which one?
Approve the child management that we took off the child management. Good grief. The child nutrition food services management policy EE as submitted. That was item H on the consent agenda.
And who was the second? I'm sorry.
Jeremy.
Thank you. Coming at you.
I'm getting the ESSER 3 childcare classroom proposal on my screen.
Sorry, would you prefer a hand vote? Let's just do that. Okay, so we had a motion from Jamie and a second from Jeremy. All in favor? Please raise your hand.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. And that leaves us with the meal prices, if anyone would like to motion to approve those for this school year.
I move to approve the meal prices for the 2023 to 2024 school year, including a 5-cent increase for breakfast and a 10-cent increase for lunch as submitted.
I second.
Regular vote, okay? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Great, thank you. Thank you for a really good discussion on that. Item 7D, recommendation of audit services agreement.
Yeah, I'm actually going to have Ms. Stephanie Pope, our Director of Business, come up and kind of walk you through our process and what the recommendation is. So thanks.
Good evening, everyone. So last week we had a committee of 8 people who met. We sent out 10 requests for proposals. We had one officially decline, and then we got 4. All 4 were very highly recommended. So this came down to just the small details of clients that were similar, service fees, and then just being able to meet our deadline. So when we were looking at everything, something just additional that I wanted to add, a lot of those requests had a single audit separate from what they considered the main audit. So I just want to take a moment to explain what a single audit is. So we receive federal funding, and every time, if we receive funding more than $750,000, then we're required to get 40% of that audited. For us, historically, we've always had 2 programs audited. When I talk about programs, it could be our children nutrition, it could be ESSER, it could be our title, it could be our IDEA funds. So that was something that we considered when we thought about that additional single audit price or service fees. So our recommendation is Gordon CPA for the 23, 24, and 25 auditing years. Any questions?
Yeah, what questions do we have, Jamie? Anything to add as part of that committee?
No, I think it was a really great committee to be a part of. We had a lot of local expertise vetting the RFPs. So I think that we ended up with, all the applicants were great, but I think we ended up with the one that really met all of our requirements.
Does anyone have any questions, any further questions for Stephanie or Jamie? This is also an action item.
I'll move to approve Gordon CPA LLC to provide annual fiscal auditing services as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. That takes us to item 8A board reports. We had a Tech College board meeting on Monday. Got an update from our economic partnerships person, Corey Spikes. He's really been out moving and shaking and meeting new people and finding new opportunities for the Tech College. We also had a first draft of our master agreement and approved our master plan. And yeah, it was a really good, productive meeting. What's next? The rec center, right?
Yep, and the rec center has had some tremendous activity going on. Sports is through the roof. I think we had 47 baseball kids, 44 softball kids. Numbers are going up. Weather's good for sports. Probably some neat things that we did some business on. A golf zone simulator. We approved the purchase of a golf simulator, and I think we're still in the process of receiving bids from different contractors to install it, because that's a very special thing to install the golf simulator. It's not like one thing you put there. It has to be set a certain way. And we approved the purchase of a new floor for the fitness center, which if you've ever seen the floor at the Emporia Rec Fitness Center, you know why every time I speak, I give an update on why I want a new rec center building. And so that is actually going to be really nice and make it really decent for the patrons and stop people from tripping. And then I think the future funding committee that's looking at funding sources for a renovated rec center is still in the process, really right in the thick of still meeting. We haven't really received any hard recommendations from them yet, but I know that group, which Jamie is a part of, is working really, really hard.
Is your golf simulator movable if you get your dream remodel?
If I remember correctly, it's going to be set in one of the racquetball courts, I think. Don't quote me on that, because if I said that wrong, there's going to be a team of racquetball people somewhere that are going to come down with pitchforks to the next public comment of the rec board. But one of the areas is going to be converted so that it will be a kind of a space just for that, which will be really cool.
Cool. BFAC. Art and Jamie, right?
We did get a recent update. We talked a lot about William Allen White and that process. We specifically talked about wanting the public to know that our budget is the same as it was before. So I think there was some concern maybe in the public that we might minimize our plans there, but we do have some concerns as far as meeting a threshold, keeping our renovations under, I think, 50%, so as to not trigger excess costs for due to state law. So we're working around that, but we're still investing the amount of money that we promised to spend initially. So I'm real happy with that progress.
Anything to add, Jamie?
No, I think that Art covered it. And then I think too, we are still planning to spend just over $6 million. And so that commitment in the budget is still the same. Of course, from when we first set the bond till now, there's been a lot of changes in the economy. And so our money might not go as far, but our commitment is still there. And then we also talked about what it might look like that after we finish the building project at William Allen White, what could we do with capital outlay down the road also, just to make sure that the rest of the building, gets the love and attention that it needs also. And but we all feel really good. It's been a really collaborative process.
Okay. That takes us to our favorite part of the evening, executive sessions.
Well, with that invitation, I move to enter executive session for 20 minutes to discuss negotiation information pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and that we return to open session in this room at 7:46 p.m. Dr. Allison Harder, Interim Assistant Superintendent of Business, Dr. David McGee, and Director of Human Resources, Jared Griffin, are invited to join the board for the session. No action is anticipated.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
The gears in my mind were turning to get the math right, and then I was like, 35, 45, add a minute. I can do this.
You did great, Jeremy.
Ready?
I entertain a motion to return to regular session, please.
So moved.
Second?
Great. Motion in a couple seconds. Please cast your vote. Get like 12.
Motion passes 7-0.
I move that we go into executive session for 13 minutes to discuss confidential student information pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under the Kansas Open Meeting Act, and to return to this room at 8:01 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Allison Harder is invited to join the session. No action is anticipated.
Motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
return to regular session.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, one more exec session. Who wants to motion that?
I move to enter executive session for 10 minutes to discuss the superintendent evaluation pursuant to the non-elected personnel exception under Kansas Open Meetings Act, and will return to open session in this room at 8:14 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Allison Harder is invited to join the session.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion
Madam President, I move we return to regular session.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Madam President, as a result of executive session, I have a motion to make. I move to extend the superintendent's contract through June 30th of 2025 with terms and conditions to be determined at a later date.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
This will need to be a hand vote. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Future board calendar dates. Next, 2 Wednesdays from today, we have our board tours. We'll go get to see the middle school village in Logan. We're excited to see those buildings. And then our regular meeting will follow at 6:30. Then we also have our board retreat and regular meeting on Wednesday, July 12th. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Please cast your votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. To our giant audience.